speak about youth leadership challenges and opportunities, and invite young people to speak about the challenges that we were facing 3 weeks ago, and see how young people can step in to determine the future. But unfortunately, mainly for Afghanistan, things changed very, very rapidly. Um, but I am happy that we have friends from Afghanistan here to speak more um, about what's going on. So the flow of the conversation today will be that we will invite our four guest speakers to everyone to make 5 minutes of opening remarks, to speak about themselves, share their story with us, and also speak about their work. I would like particularly to ask our speaker Harun Rahimi to speak more about the situation in Afghanistan, about his understanding of the situation, because he's been writing and speaking about it. Our second part of today's event will be a moderated discussion that I, together with my colleagues, will moderate a 30 minutes discussion with our guest speakers. And our third part is an open discussion in a Q&A where everyone can share their thoughts, their ideas around the topic, and also ask their questions from our speakers. I would like to invite, on our list on our agenda, we have Nugent Mustafa, but I would like to invite Mr. Harun first to give us an idea of what's happening, what's going on in Afghanistan. And Harun, where are you right now? And you've been writing a lot on Twitter in the past few days, and you have been writing interesting things. And I think what you have been writing are incredible. But I'd like to introduce Mr. Harun first. Harun Rahimi is Assistant Professor of Law at the American University of Afghanistan. He's also a visiting research fellow at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies. His research interests are law and development, institutional reform, and Islam and politics. Harun, first of all, tell us more about yourself and tell us what's going on in Afghanistan. What is the situation? And how do you see this moment? There's a lot happening. How do you see this moment in the coming few days, in weeks, in months even?
I just have a hard time speaking right now, honestly, but it's been a very emotional day. And I would like to answer more questions than speak, because I don't think I will have the train of thought to speak properly. But just the latest update is that President Ghani has left Afghanistan. And the worst case scenario seems to be happening politically, which is Taliban taking over Kabul with force, with no plan in place for a transition yet. If that materializes, meaning the Taliban will take over the government and choose not to include any other constituency in the interim administration or the future administration, or basically choose to control the entire, monopolize power, we will, I'm afraid that the cycle of violence in Afghanistan will not end. We will have a government that will be perceived as imposed militarily by a lot of Afghans. We'll have a government that will be seen as illegitimate in the eyes of many Afghans. And those Afghans may organize and resist. And we will have be at this moment again, the mistakes of the first Bonn conference, where Taliban were excluded from the power, contributed to the disaster we are seeing today. It seems like the same mistakes are happening again. Another power taking over Kabul militarily, and excluding anyone else from the power, and trying to monopolize the entire power. If that happens, I'll be very afraid for the future of the country.
Harun, you've been writing about a transition of power and calling for a smooth and bloodless transition of power. You have been writing 2-3 days ago that the war is over and that is not the solution. And not many people were speaking about that. They were not saying what you were saying. And now I'm so concerned and worried that you're saying that there's going to be challenges, there's going to be more problems, there's going to be, I'm afraid, street to street fight in Kabul. What do you think can be done? What do you think can be done now? And what do you think are the people of Afghanistan calling on their leaders, people who can still mobilize people? What can be done now in order to avoid a further escalation of violence and a catastrophe from happening?
Yeah, I mean, there are two issues to look at. One is just the whole transition. And I think there the point is that it has to be as bloodless, as swift, and as orderly as possible. Kabul is a huge city. It's a city of 5 million people. There are thousands of internally displaced people just living on the streets and in tents. So they're not really, even they don't have the safety of being home as all of this is unfolding. And Kabul is a huge place compared to like other cities that the Taliban took over. It's going to take time for any authority to take over Kabul, especially if that authority is going to be resisted in certain places by some of the leftovers of the security forces or by some local actors. So your fear of the violence on the streets of Kabul is real. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope that Taliban coordinate with the Afghan National Security Forces and try to reach out and have a coordinated takeover. That is just an immediate concern, just to avoid bloodshed. Afghans have suffered enough, as you know, as many of you, we have suffered enough. Just a moment of respite would be welcome. The other issue is the political future. What happens next after the transition? I was hoping that there would be a neutral transitional government that could meaningfully facilitate a broad-based participation of different groups in deciding what the future of Afghanistan would look like. But if that's gone, it seems so that there would be no interim government, or the interim government would be an extension of the Taliban. So there will be really no one with credibility to actually facilitate the process of having discussions about the future politics of Afghanistan, future political system of Afghanistan. And it's just going to be basically a takeover by Taliban, an exclusion of any other person from the power. That is going to be incredibly harmful for the future of the country. In terms of what can be done, I think if you are outside of Afghanistan, advocate for humanitarian relief, because this is going to disrupt people's lives. At the end of the day, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, 35 million people have to make a stay and live in Afghanistan. They need help immediately. Afghanistan is dealing with droughts, with COVID, and now complete disruptions of public institutions, trade, and so forth. Also advocate for refugees to be admitted where they get to. I mean, a lot of people fear legitimately for fear revenge. They feel like they may be targeted by the Taliban or other bad actors, because it could lead to a lawlessness situation around Kabul or some part of the country. So advocate for people to be given refuge where they actually turn into. And more broadly, just make sure that people don't forget about Afghanistan. The international legitimacy could still be relevant for the Taliban. I'm not very optimistic, but it could be something that is the last leverage left. If they don't care about domestic legitimacy to be perceived legitimate by Afghans, they may still care about international recognition, and putting pressure on the politicians in other countries that they should not recognize a Taliban government that does not include other segments of the society, does not form a government that reflects the diversity of Afghanistan. That should not be recognized. And we should really put pressure, the last hope and leverage that is left, to pressure them to actually move towards some sort of inclusive system.
I would like to ask my last question, and that is, what can we listen from this, mainly as young Afghans, as young leaders here? You're a professor at the American University of Afghanistan, so you're in contact and working very closely with a lot of young Afghans, and you're very well connected with young leaders around the world. What do you think are the 2-3 key lessons that we can learn from this? And we have young leaders here joining us from different countries, from different parts of the world. What do you think they can do for Afghanistan right now?
In terms of actions I talked about earlier, but in terms of like, if you want to take a leadership lesson from what happened, Danny is a textbook failed leader. He surrounded himself with people who did not dare to criticize him, did not dare to give him reflect the actual reality on the ground. So he did not have information, and the people around him who would give him information that would not agree with his preconceived views, he would not listen to them. He had hubris. He believed that he was the savior of Afghanistan. He believed that he only was the answer to everything that could happen. He did not believe in power sharing. He and his close advisors had purged government from anyone who was not loyal to them. So if you're thinking about, like, as a leader, how I should be, you should be the opposite. Have diverse voices, allow criticism, allow people to tell you what you don't want to hear, and believe and actually practice this mantra that governance is political, meaning it's not about what you think is right. It's about building consensus. It's about creating buy-in. That ensures legitimacy. If you are authoritarian, you lose legitimacy, and authoritarian governments don't last long.
Thank you, Harun. During the moderated discussion, we will have more questions to you, and I'm sure our colleagues here, participants, they will also have questions for you. Our second speaker is Nugin Mustafa. Nugin is now a great friend of mine. I met Nugin in Munich during the One Young World Summit, and when Nugin was speaking on stage, she spoke about her story and about the war in Syria, and that brought us a lot of us on tears. I actually cried when Nugin was speaking there because we share a lot. We have a lot of things in common. I'm a child of conflict. I was born and raised in war, and Nugin and I share a similar story, and I believe a lot of us have a similar story and experience. Nugin is a Syrian refugee activist and a One Young World ambassador. She was raised in Aleppo, Syria, and gained attention after traveling 3,500 miles, which is 5,600 kilometers by wheelchair, fleeing conflict in the Syrian civil war, before arriving and resettling in Germany. She's the recipient of 2019 award. She's the recipient of 2019 Alison Desforges Award for Extraordinary Activism. Nugin, welcome, and tell us more about yourself and about your story, and how do you think the world can do better, work together to ensure that another Syrian story, that another Afghan story, that another Iraq story, that another Yemen story does not occur in the next 10, 25 or 30 years? Nugin, you're muted.
Yeah. So thank you for having me here. I'm very glad to be here. And I'll give myself a bit of an introduction. I'm Nugin Mustafa, 22 years old. Was born with cerebral palsy, which means that I cannot walk, and I use a wheelchair. Growing up, I did not receive any kind of formal education due to the inaccessibility of the infrastructure in my own country, Syria. And then when the war broke out, I escaped to Germany, using a wheelchair and crossing the distance that was just mentioned. And afterwards, I think since 2015, I have been engaged in advocacy work for refugees and people with disabilities. I've had the honor of being the first person with a disability to address the UN Security Council. This speech contributed to the adoption of Resolution 2475, where a resolution on the protection of young people with disabilities living in conflict. I'm also part of the Young Person with Disabilities Youth Network. The network that's been established this year. We're trying to tackle the barriers faced by young people with disabilities around the world, and to try to include them more in the policy and decision-making processes within the UN system, and also in the 2030 agenda, because that's one of the things that I've noticed ever since being a part of the advocacy work, is that young people with disabilities and people with disabilities and refugees in general are excluded pretty much from the decision-making process anywhere, and that this is of course not acceptable. So in terms of what we can do to avoid even more conflicts, I think we need to work on changing mentalities. Something needs to be done so that future generations stop thinking of war and conflict as the solution to something, as the way to get to as the way to achieve a certain goal, as the way to ensure that a country or a region prospers or gains its independence. And I think, so, and where we can start from, that shift in mentality is from early childhood. I think a lot of things happen in our region and this area and part of the world, but I think we fail to take lessons from history, and innocent people end up paying for that. It's totally irresponsible. So I think most of the time the root causes of each and every conflict is ignored. Either it's exclusion, it's stigma, it's racism, it's extremism. All of that, all of these mentalities and agenda need to be moderated in that way. And we need to teach our youngsters that anything that might lead to violence and to you killing someone else is just not right, and that you yourself need to put a stop to it. You are capable of that, because you are the one. The younger generation is the future of each country, and if we raise a generation with this mentality, then I think we will have a much peaceful world to live in. Just shifting the mindset from achieving progress through force, I think would be a great step toward a more peaceful world for all of us, I think.
Thank you, Nugent, for your remarks. We'll have questions for you. Our third speaker is Roman Temutko. Roman is CEO and co-founder of Strum Communications Agency. He's a digital marketing expert, and he's Ukrainian youth delegate to the United Nations in 2019 and 20. He's chief correspondent for the Ukrainian weekly US-based newspaper highlighting Eastern European agenda for an American audience. Welcome, Roman, and tell us more about yourself, about your work, and what do you think at this moment about youth leadership and challenges and opportunities towards youth leadership?
Hello, everyone. Sorry for background sound. I'm in a loud place. I'm glad to see all of you here. And can you hear me well? Yeah, so I was a youth delegate of Ukraine to the end. And first of all, I see what is connecting a big part of us is getting our education and living our youth in the world, and particularly in some countries which overcome foreign aggression or foreign occupation or other kinds of conflict. And that's one of the main reasons why our country and me myself always were good friends and partners with, for example, Georgian youth delegates, because we have a similar occupant country who attacked our countries, and it always was a challenge also for youth. And well, in my speech at the UN General Assembly, I told a story about my friend who, 3 years ago now, was a part of Ukrainian Navy, but at that point of the story, his ship was just passing like a regular route, but they were attacked by Russian troops, and he was in custody. He was in like a Russian prison for almost 11 months, and like he told me a lot of details about this imprisonment, about a bit of tortures, about inappropriate medical conditions he was in. And I was feeling, first of all, like how lucky am I at that moment that in a country which has a part occupied by other country, I can still live like life without any security issues, without any like threat for my particular region in the country. And we sometimes we live in different realities, being in the same countries or in the same continent, or basically in the same world. Our lives may be similar in so many ways. We are using Zoom right now and can see each other, and we have access to a lot of information. But in the meantime, our level of our security in our home or on our streets are different. And this shouldn't be the case in the future, which are building with you. So basically, I believe my engagement in youth activities ended a few months ago, or maybe a year ago, as my mandate of Ukrainian Youth Delegate expired. Now I'm focused on communications agency, and I can see a lot of situations in the world through the lens of communication, maybe marketing in some cases. And I can see now, I understand more deeply the war of narratives, the war of developing messages, scenarios, stories, and fairy tales about present, past, and future, and how we are all fighting for our stories in which we believe in. It's the stories we incorporate in our values, and the part which story is heard the most, or which story is more convictious, is the winner. So we will live in the world with the values which are incorporated in the stories we tell. So first of all, I believe that we should speak, we should tell stories, we should explain a lot, we should speak with each other and publicly to express ourselves and to express our beliefs and to express our values. And maybe we should allow ourselves to do it more aggressively, to get our voice higher and to make us being heard for a larger audience. Because when we are maybe afraid to speak a bit louder, or afraid to when we try to be more diplomatic, let's say, maybe our voice isn't heard as loud as voice of people with different values and voice of people who don't want peace or sustainable development so much as us. So I encourage all of you to speak louder and to tell stories in all possible ways you can. And I'm so grateful for Ramis and Vika getting this meeting and inviting our friend from Afghanistan, telling the story from his perspective, from the place where it all happens. And I have this belief in what you tell, so I'm highly interested in asking questions in a Q&A session. And the way we all perceive from this Zoom meeting and for the next period of time is the way we hear it here. So it's also an opportunity to share our point of view and to express ourselves. So I'm happy that we have a chance to hear a tough, difficult story, but from the person who knows it from himself. Thank you. That's all for me now. Thank you. See you in the Q&A session.
Thank you, Roman, for being here with us today. Thank you for joining us. You're a good friend of our network. Our fourth speaker is Isma Gomeradze. Isma is co-founder of Network of Former Youth Delegates to the United Nations. She's former youth representative of Georgia to the UN and youth and disabled rights activist. Isma, you have been doing a lot of great things lately. You've been a member of many youth platforms. So I would like you to tell us yourself more about that, about your recent work and activities, and also speak about your work and about youth leadership, the challenges and opportunities that you see.
Thank you, Ramesh, very much for organizing this event and for staying focused still and functional. Just yesterday, I was also remembering because you, as well as me, and as well as many of us, unfortunately, have witnessed the war in our lifetime, which is not so short, or which has not been so short, so long so far. And we already have witnessed the war. And I remember those days 13 years ago when I was 14 years old. Then the Russians started war against Georgia again. I remember that I was not functional at all those days. I was not able to I don't know, study, or I would not have been able to do all of this, what you have been doing now. So keep up, and thank you very much for this. Generally speaking, I also want to say that what we see in Afghanistan happening is very, very worrying. And Georgia actually has been sending the peacekeeping mission there. And generally speaking, we are pretty close to the Middle East and to this whole area geographically. And as we're a small country, everything affects us, whatever happens in nearby or further away. So we are very much concerned and watching what is going on. One thing that really strikes me, unfortunately, is the behavior of the leadership. It's so easy nowadays to leave the country that you were responsible for. And when you have a privilege of being on top and being in the elite, you have, these opportunities that your co-citizens don't have, that is to flee the country, which, centuries ago, there was not such an opportunity. And unfortunately, many leaders today lose motivation to do their best and for their countries, because they know that if something happens, they have this option to flee, unfortunately. I also want to comment on the UN Security Council resolution on people with disabilities in conflict-affected areas. As I have a disability myself, I really would prefer to see more emphasis on active participation of people with disabilities in conflict transformation, in let's say disaster relief, than on just mere protection of them, which is unfortunately the language of the resolution today. So unfortunately, yes, as I have heard once, and I will repeat this quote, the pandemic has stopped economics, but has not stopped geopolitics. And we in our neighborhood also had a recent conflict around the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which also will have and already had some consequences on the whole region. Anyways, I will tell a bit more about myself. I was born with a disability, namely I'm totally blind. My parents sold their business, sold their home, and lived to the capital, to Tbilisi, to give me education, to send me to school. So I was 8 years old when I started schooling, which was a bit late. And unlike many children who don't want to go to school, I was eager to go to school. And there it was a place where I was not treated as a patient, where I had to do my homework, where I had my responsibilities. And I really started the life and started getting my place in the world, in the society, in the community. Meanwhile, unfortunately, Georgia also has been coming, especially in the early years of its regaining its independence. We had a lot of issues. I mean, we didn't have electricity, we didn't have access to water or natural gas or many other things. And but when I started school, soon the things started also improving. So I really grew up watching how things have been slowly but surely improving. And that was what gave me sense of identity and sense that I had a place in this country. And when I was 14 years old, suddenly the world started shattering because Russians invaded again, as they have done few times through the history. We didn't know how much land they would seize this time, well, that time, and whether or not they would eventually have taken over the capital. And we were afraid that what happened in North Caucasus would be repeated here in Tbilisi as well. Well, fortunately, we survived. But yes, I was, as I said, I also was abroad at that point. And unfortunately, I can feel Rami's and the way he is feeling now, because you walk out, you walk around the streets and you see people are laughing, smiling, going to a market, doing their business as usual, like everyday work. And you know that your country gets shelled. You never know. My father was building the house back then, and he could hear the military planes hovering over our house, which still was not built. And as a child, I had a lot of anxieties and a lot of fears. And back then I was thinking, where could we flee even? And I actually thought of Ukraine as of a safe and peaceful country, which to my mind and my understanding would have never have to experience the war, which in few years, unfortunately, it also did and still is. So so those days actually were the days where I was imagining and thinking about and wondering and dreaming of the day when I could represent my country in some sort of court, defending its population and defending its rights and speaking about the human rights violations that have been happening as a result of the occupation and aggression. And when I graduated from high school, I actually entered the university. I studied the law, and I still had this idea in mind of representing Georgia internationally. And when so because I was studying in a specialized school for the blind, I didn't feel back then that the world was really not fit for the blind, that the sighted world is not accessible. I didn't feel it. And when I started studying at the university, I started feeling this. And because of that, I saw that I will not be able to represent the country internationally or do anything else unless we, as people with disabilities, as young people with disabilities, are included and are given access, and that our rights are being advocated for. So I started advocating for the rights of people with disabilities by describing how I was studying, what kind of assistive devices and technologies I needed for that, and so on. I was getting a lot of journalists to interview me about that, because not so many people with disabilities turned out to be at universities and being vocal about the challenges that they face. And then I started volunteering as camp counselor, as translator for different organizations. And I have been trying to become a UN youth delegate for 4 years. And eventually I managed to become, I got selected, and I represented Georgia internationally at the UN General Assembly as I wanted, as I was thinking about and as I wished. So of course, I continue my work on disability rights now, But again, I am very much interested in everything else, and a member of few youth networks, such as European Democracy Youth Network, such as the Consortium on Elections by the NDI, IRI, and USAID, and a few others, and of course our network of former and current UN youth delegates. I always was thinking that I didn't want to end my mandate by just ending it. I wanted to contribute to its development and its expansion to other countries. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to questions.
Thank you very much, Isma. Your stories is very powerful. It's inspiring, and it's similar to so many of us. Now we move on to the moderated panel discussion. I would like Lika to lead the moderated discussion.
Thank you, Ramiz, and thanks to all our wonderful, inspirational speakers who have such extraordinary stories to share. And there are just too many questions right now. I'm sure everyone who just heard the speakers' stories have thousands of questions to ask them about their journey, about what was driving them, about how they were dealing with whatever they were dealing with, and about their solutions, ideas, and there's just too much to discuss. But there is one question that I would like to ask each one of you, because it is so relevant and it is so important. And of course, half an hour of moderated discussion is not really enough to find the answers to this question. But let's try and let's try to share as much as we can in this time, because that is the idea of why we're meeting and discussing, to help each other find the solutions and to keep holding the leaders accountable, because as it was already mentioned, the leaders are not doing their job, and all of us, all of the young people all over the world must be outraged and angry at the leaders right now, because when we are inventing machines that can start life on Mars, and when we're exploring space, it is just impossible to believe that we cannot find solutions to problems on this planet, and specifically to war, because each and every one of you mentioned war in your speeches. And that's the question, that's what the question is related to. The UN Security Council Resolution 2250, which was, as we all know, adopted in 2015. How can we, young people, actually contribute to this resolution? How can we actually see the results that this resolution is working and it is changing lives of young people in conflict-affected countries, and not only conflict-affected countries? I would like to ask each one of you. We have Syria, Afghanistan, Georgia, and Ukraine represented here. How do you think, what can governments do? What can the UN do? What can we young people do to put this resolution in action and actually have youth, peace, and security as a reality of 21st century, which unfortunately it really is not right now? What can we do? And maybe we can start in the same direction as we started, and maybe we can start with Afghanistan. Harun, if you could share your thoughts about this question. Sorry, Harun is left us. We can move to Najin. Najin, if you could.
Sure. Well, I think the most important thing is, is for us to, is for everyone to ensure that, young people resume their education as soon as possible. and that they have access to, the building blocks of their lives. Now, I think the world is connected more than ever, and there are we should make an effort to find a way to be connected to people living in conflict, so that they can, maybe even at a distance, have some sort of continuation of their education and of their lives even before the conflict. And I think that it's very important also to involve them in the, in the policy making, decision making, and implementation processes, because I think that the assumptions that seniors have, that they know what that they know what they need to know about about how to solve a certain problem, especially when it's related to youth, is very false. And I think that every facet of society should contribute to any kind of peace building process. So you cannot have peace negotiations without a person with disability. You cannot have them without a youth. You cannot have them without the elderly. You cannot have them without women. All of that is very crucial if we want our countries and our regions to be better. And all of this can be done if the effort is made, if it's acknowledged that this is the missing link. We need more feedback. We need to actually talk to people, not about them. We need to let them represent themselves rather than have organizations or bodies of governance speaking on their behalf. And that's initial step of empowerment and self-representation, and is, I think, one of the most important steps. And I think and I believe that once all these categories people get involved, I think once the extent of the catastrophes that war brings on to people is revealed, and is more visible, I think that would automatically increase the pressure to resolve it more quickly, and to start building a more peaceful society and peaceful countries for everyone.
Thank you, Jean. Definitely, education is crucial if we want to put this resolution in action, but also what kind of education we're talking to. I'm a firm believer that peace education is very important, on top of regular education, and gender equality. When we're talking about education and providing education is important, because both boys and girls deserve to have equal chances to get quality education. And on top of that, it is important that we advocate for that, because we do have a voice, and especially when we're all put together as young leaders, our voices can be louder, and we can get the message across more efficiently. Roman, we can move to you next. Situation in Ukraine, the resolution 2250, how young Ukrainians are involved in peace processes, and what does peace look like in the Ukrainian context? Thoughts, ideas, solutions?
Yes, a little bit of context. So in 2014, Russian troops entered Crimea autonomous region and invaded it, staging a fake referendum, and then claimed that the people of Crimea voted for entering Russia, but the referendum was triggered, and like it was illegal. And then Russian troops entered the eastern border of Ukraine. Oh, sorry, Mahamat, maybe you could turn off the mic. Or the admin code. Yeah, thank you. And in 2014 and 2015, there were a lot of fightings in the east of Ukraine, and 13,000 people died in the fightings. And as for now, we have a kind of frozen conflict, but still almost like few times a week, we still have combat, we still have fightings, and we still have lethal outcomes of a lot of fightings from both sides. And as for now, it is a question how we should proceed. Like, Ukraine doesn't have like a strategy of ending this conflict because the all decisions are made in Moscow, decisions are made by Putin, and if he doesn't want to end the war, it won't end because Ukrainian and even like Eastern European forces are not enough to fight with Russian army and Russian military, where the big part of the economy goes into military control of the region. And Northern Caucasus is also the case in and like entire region and Middle East in some cases. So as for now, Ukrainian use and like as for then and as for now, Ukrainian use, a lot of people fled from the occupied territories, and even now I'm traveling with my friend who was born and lived all his life in Donetsk, in occupied territories, like a large city of over than 1 million people, which was occupied, and now it's totally like, and no, well, not totally in ruins, but a lot of part of the city is dysfunctional and economy is ruined. So first of all, Ukrainians who migrated from the occupied territories show by their example what they achieve after they migrated, what they achieve in the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv, or in other cities. They become professional, they express themselves, they get like more comfortable lives, they get their careers. So they show to those relatives or their classmates from childhood which parents or like which families stay in the occupied territories. They show the example of functional economy, functional education and career path, and in Ukraine or in other states which is dysfunctional under the Russian occupation. And on that contrast, people can see the real situation, and people tend to believe in like propaganda which is occurred on their territory. Ukrainian forces do not have a great access of information to the occupied territories, so people are brainwashed by Russian propaganda, which shows Ukraine as dysfunctional country, as a failed state, which is obviously not. You can see me if you want to like see an example of young people who are expressing themselves, and only by friendly connections, only by family connections, close relations, you can see that you can believe your classmate. You can see him in social media or speak with him and see that like he's living in modern European country, and like you can see where are you living under occupation and what is wrong. And years after years, like the occupied parts will just collapse, and Ukraine will reintegrate them. And it's my perspective, and I also think that you may have some friends from occupied territories in your country and have an example of like speaking to them and showing them how your country, Georgia, Syria, I'm not sure about Afghanistan if it's a correct example, but still, by your example, you can communicate what can be done in democratic society. So I believe that education, to answer one of Lika's points about peace education, about gender equality education, I believe that it is important, but I'm a bit cynical about this because most people, in my opinion, only can see like material examples and like from the economic perspective. So I believe that it will be great to show that companies or societies which have more representation are more successful in an economic way of the way of living. So it's the best case to show that for the people under occupation or which countries are suffering from the aggression. So like I want for all of us to be that example that can be shown to show how democratic societies work and how we can express ourselves under democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Roman. Moving on to Esma.
I would say three things, I think. First is that, yes, I couldn't agree more with Najin when she spoke about the education, because unfortunately, in certain countries and in certain groups of people, they perceive people from countries like ours as less developed, less educated, that we are less competitive on the labor market. But it's also important to see how many opportunities did we have to develop and how many gaps in education did we have due to wars, due to civil wars. Because what conflict does in the first place is really disrupts the education pattern and intellectual and skills development of people in general. Therefore, it's very important that, of course, we, those who have ongoing conflicts, are at a disadvantage, from early on in terms of being competitive economically. The second thing is we also have to make the international processes more democratic and accepting of diversity of people, accepting even those who might not, by their appearance, by their behavior, might not exactly fit into strict diplomatic etiquette. And many young people might not be willing to or able of, speaking this professional diplomatic language right away, which should not be preventing them from being included in peace negotiations, in all kind of decision-making processes. And the third is that there is this perception, unfortunately, that people from countries that have undergone some wars, we just all want to just immigrate, and we don't want our countries, and this is why the wars happen. Again, this blame theory, this is not true. I remember when I was exactly 13 years ago, I really wanted to go home, and when I expressed this with some friends of my mother's where I was then, and she said, well, but there's a war in Georgia, which it was already kind of over at that point. It was already in September of 2008. And like she was like, where do you want to go back? There's war, which there was no war, but I still wanted to come back. And I still was very eager to come back. And so, yeah, whenever it's possible, we tend to be returning if the conditions allow. And this is something that we should also make known to the international community. Thank you.
Thank you, Esma. It's definitely extremely important to give everyone an opportunity to have a say and leave no one behind, which is a phrase often used at the UN, and a very important phrase for each and every one of us. But sometimes that phrase is not actually put in action, which is what we are fighting for as youth delegates and as young leaders. And definitely there are a lot of challenges regarding this resolution, but the hope is that we will be able to create a world where this resolution will achieve its mission, which is to create a peaceful world where young people have opportunities to grow and fulfill their potentials. With this, I would like to give the floor to Nino. Nino is current UN Youth Delegate of Georgia, and Nino will continue moderation and Q&A part. of our meeting.
Thank you, Rita, for the introduction, and hello everyone. I guess today's space is very, very important because we are youth and we are talking about youth leadership. And it was very interesting listening all of you and like connecting some dots as well, because I'm also a refugee from Abkhazia, Georgia, and whatever today was talked about like touched me even more. So with this, I want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, because we're also checking our Facebook Live, maybe some of the ones who are watching our live can type their questions there and leave questions there. Or if you have questions, you can type in our chat and I will give you space to share and ask the questions from yourself and from your side. As well, if anyone wants to give any comment or just sharing, maybe not a question, but sharing, you can also raise your hand or type in the chat and we will make sure that we'll give you a space to ask a question or have a little sharing. So before you are thinking about what to ask and managing to write your questions in the chat box, I will continue with one question that I have to everyone, because today we were talking about like different political situations and whatever is happening now around us. But now I want to dig deeper more on personal level, because all the speakers we have today are very strong individuals as individuals. So I have a question to all the speakers. From where do you drive and drain the motivation itself? When you feel like down, and because lots of things are happening around us and all of you have different perspectives and different backgrounds, what is something that gives you motivation and where do you find the strength in you? So I guess we can follow the same flow. And Eugene, if you can answer, and then we can continue with Roman and Esma. Or if there is some connection problem, we can start with Roman and then we can get back to Eugene.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm also very interested in hearing answers to that, because I actually sometimes when I feel down, I lack of instruments to get back from that. But as for now, as I try my path on entrepreneurship, which was a lot harder than I thought of, I had some. I was on the verge of nervous breakdowns for a few moments. But first of all, I take motivation and courage and inspiration from my team, from the people in my company, from those who surround me with their worldview, with their approaches, and with their motivation to create a better world. Second, I try to think of my childhood dreams. I try to think as I was thinking like 5 years ago or even 1 year ago, and try to remember what I was dreaming of and how I imagined my future. And in many ways, I couldn't imagine how many opportunities, how many great people around me I would have now compared to like what I wanted earlier. And it also maybe like in career, education, or other spheres of life. And then some basic stuff as walking on the streets, drinking coffee, getting some sleep, and reading books. And I think it may not fit our discussion with like our high discussion, but yeah, sleeping is a nice instrument. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roman, for your answer. And now I guess we can move back with Nujin.
Yeah, so motivation is really, when I was younger, life looked much bleaker than it does now for me. So back then, my motivation was, I believe that no one, no one has come to this world for nothing. Like no one is here for spare, as spare. And God created me so I can do something about it. So, there's nothing called like an extra number in the world's population. And now as I'm older, I think when there are times that I'm feeling down, I think, look back at your life. There are times in your life where you thought you were stuck and then nothing would be better. And now, like, it has, the situation has improved and you're living much better. And this is just another phase that is going to pass. And I also believe that, emotions are constantly in motion. So just let it flow and take its time, and then hope go away. Unless you have a critical condition, then I believe that emotions are constantly in motion, and one feeling will follow the other. So a down period will be followed by a up period. I think that that's what keeps me motivated, is just that, and the fact that you cannot always control what happens in your life, but you can control your reaction to them. And if it remains positive and productive, I think you can overcome a lot of obstacles and anxieties and worries around your life.
Thank you so much, Nujin. It was very nice to hear your answers. And I guess now we can move to Esma.
Sure. So I think motivation, I really would agree with what Roman has said about reading, and also reading because then you can see how others have been suffering throughout the history in the past and now, and how much we actually had made since then, since the times that, let's say, were described in the books. Therefore, that's a good source of motivation. I would also say, when I see how people get forward, those people with whom I maybe shared some information with, whom I have maybe mentored, that they are applying for certain programs, that they are starting the jobs or internships that I have suggested. And also, yeah, I would say, generally speaking, focus on what I can do rather than what is wrong in the world, because there are a lot of things that are wrong in the world. But I mean, 24 hours and one human being is not enough to fix everything. So just think about, what do I have to do and what can I fix at where I am right now.
Thank you so much, Esma. And I totally agree with you, what you said about that. Like, alone you can't do lots of things, but we need each other to empower each other, and togetherness is the key to unlock a better future. So thank you so much, all of you, for your inspiring answers. And now we have another question from our delegate, Chedi. So I see your question is very heavy. So maybe if you can unmute yourself, the stage will be yours and you can ask the question, and you can also mention whom are you asking the question.
Sure. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for dedicating the time to be with all of us on the Sunday and sharing your amazing backstories. I'm Shadi. I'm originally from Iran and I'm based in Italy. I've been following closely the events that have been happening specifically in Afghanistan recently, but not just in Afghanistan in general, let's say our region, Middle East and North Africa. I hear a lot about remarks that are on education, and I do agree. My own initiative works on education in Iran, but I find us, and then I'm asking this in this specific, let's say, group where we have former delegates to the United Nations and people who work beyond just the grassroots. And I want to know that when we ask ourselves, what are the solutions, or what can we do as young leaders to face the current challenges that our peers, or also ourselves, we're facing in the context that we are. I feel like when we say education, I'm thinking of all the young girls or young boys who are now in Afghanistan, and yes, their education is really important, but I think most of our generation and the future generations are being much more educated compared to the past ones or even the current ones. This does not mean that I advocate against it, but I think the problem lies in political will, really. And my question really to all of our delegates or anyone else, even in the audience, is how can we face this this big gap, which is sometimes political will, it's corruption, it's a weak systems of governance. And to take that a step further is, as a young leader, I feel like many of us are extremely lonely. And there is a lot of political and social apathy going on towards the challenges that we have in our contexts. And what do we do about that? When you open your social media and you have to go and educate every single person who has good intentions and wants to help, but doesn't know anything or doesn't really care about educating themselves, whereas their voice or their action might actually matter in changing the status quo or the situation where we are facing challenges. I know these are really questions that, I mean, I don't expect concrete answers from them. I'm just a fellow young leader here trying to share my concerns, my worries, and my experiences with you, and to try to see what your thoughts are on this. And I hope we can all work on these to change the future for the better for all of us. Thank you so much.
I can start, since the question is to all speakers. First of all, I believe that we should not make the situation worse, and it's good enough. So I don't believe that all of us should be heroes and like savers of our world and else. Let's not put too much pressure on ourselves, on every one of us. So we can contribute in a big way. We are contributing in a big way. And if you don't believe that you do good enough or you do enough for your future, for your country, stop. You are doing enough. That's the first thing we should all embrace. Second, I believe that there are times of revolutions and are times of evolutions. So education, long-term strategies, creating new markets, new spheres, new ideas, new stories, new narratives, it might be like a long-term task, a long-term goal, and developing strong institutions. And anyway, SDGs are long-term goals. First of all, you can just take those goals of SDGs in your country and try to develop a project, like small project, good enough project, minimum value product to change a little bit on the topic. And like, but if you feel that it's too long and if like the evolution is like too hard and too long, just don't make the situation worse, in my opinion. And sometimes maybe if we have like 13 people in this Zoom, maybe one of us in our lifetime will be a part of a revolution in some kind of way. I'm not speaking of like a political revolution. Maybe it's gonna be a idea revolution or informational revolution. Maybe like someone of us will become new Malala or new Greta, or like just name it, and not just name the person who inspires you. But like we like it's impossible for all of us to become this person, and like maybe it's also a big philosophical discussion: who is more important, like a person who does something for the entire world, brings some idea to change the world, or a person who changes like his or her local community. So like I think in my head it's more simplified, just to choose your own passion and just try to contribute a little bit. And if you see a window of opportunities, move. And if you wake up in the morning and you feel that it might be your day to do something big, just do it. But it's only a matter of a chance, and very small chance. But in the meantime, just don't make the situation worse and follow your passion. Thank you.
Yeah, I fully agree that we shouldn't put a pressure on yourself, and it's not. I don't think that a change of the kind that we're hoping for is going to happen overnight. It's going to take a lot of collective effort. It's going to take a lot of mainstreaming, lots of issues that we deal with as youth, and that's what I would that's what I would put the most of the effort. It's just making sure that we're not forgotten in the general agenda, and that and that we keep poking decision makers on the elbow and saying, okay, this is happening, this exists, and we need to work on it. Ensuring that we the issues do not become invisible, and and since there's a lot of great connectivity around the world, I think we can there are ways to increase the interest of the public in certain issues. These days you can just launch a hashtag and you'll have thousands of views and likes on it. So I think that ensuring that these issues are always highlighted and not like forgotten and left aside in the agenda is always important. That that there is someone behind them, and that there is always some pressure being applied to make sure that the leaders of these initiatives are included and are ensuring that this that our big goal stays a work in progress is I think at this point more important than accomplishing it as soon as possible. So I would think that a collective consistent effort is what would matter, and ultimately make the desired effect that we want.
Thank you, both of you. And now, Esma, you can answer the question.
Yes, I would say first thing that nothing is irreversible, neither democracy nor human rights, but nor is the totalitarianism as well. So, I mean, there were times when under the Soviet rule, the millions of people were killed with the artificial famine or artificial hunger, with hundreds of thousands of Georgians, for example, were shot dead and executed. But things have changed, even though at that point nobody would have thought that these things would change ever. And yes, I would also agree with Roman that start with small things, and maybe not with necessarily criticizing your government per se, if it's not possible and if you know that this will not have a lot of results, but even just like by starting maybe with some health related awareness campaign or environment related awareness campaign or something. So like creating social demand for certain things from like grassroots level could, I think, make a lot of change and can make a difference in the end. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Esma, for your answer. And thank you everyone for giving your answers. It was very inspiring. And I guess that's the beauty of our conversation today. How much we can learn from each other, just even by listening to each other. And thank you. I can also, and I want to remind all of you, if you want to make any comment or just ask a question, just last one, because we are running out of time. As we are talking about leadership, I believe leadership is all about action and initiative. So if you have a chance, you can always, and you should always use this chance to speak up and be the role models for the others who are watching through the live. So right now, I will pass the mic then to Liga back.
Thank you, Nino. As we are wrapping up the event, I just wanted to add a couple of thoughts, and then I will pass the floor to Ramis to finish up, Shadi from Iran mentioned that most of us are really lonely in this fight to make the world better and to keep the leaders accountable for their actions. And I think that my last thoughts are inspired by Shadi's comment. And I would like to say that we are, but in a way we are not. And networks like ours and events like this show us that we are not actually lonely and alone in this really important journey of trying to make a difference. And Raman was making a point about being more down to earth and practical, which I understand and share. But at the same time, I do believe that there is a change maker. There is a hero in every single one of us. And the fact that we youth delegates decided not to stop even after our mandates and continue our work and continue trying to put SDGs in action, and the fact that there are young leaders like Najim, who joined us today, already shows that there is a lot that we can do and there is a lot that we can change together. So I do believe that one person cannot make a difference, but together as a team, as a group of change makers, we can do a lot and we can achieve a lot. And the world urgently needs that, because COVID is not the only disaster happening right now. There is war, there is famine, there is a lot of pain, and people like us should build each other up and support each other in this struggle, in this fight to make the world better. This event is a test event which will continue and will not stop. And with this test event, we would like to start series of meetings between major, mostly UN youth delegates, but also young leaders in different areas who will discuss together ideas and solutions to world's most pressing issues. And we will try to take these ideas onto a higher level to achieve progress and put them in action. Before I pass the floor to Ramis to finish with his final remarks, I'm sure he will mention this, but I would like to mention this also. Please keep Afghanistan and Afghan people in your prayers, because what is happening there is really, really tough. Ramis, please, I think I went over the time, but please.
May I say just like 2 words and I will stop. I really just want to say that it's the minority who actually push for progress, right? It's few people who invent things, who have changed technology, who have proposed some changes. So even though there might not be so many of us, it still is that our persistence and our motivation is what will drive change in the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Isma. Thank you, Lika. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I would like to thank our guest speakers. Thank you for taking the time to be with us here today. I would like to say that we believe that behind every disaster is a leadership failure, and that is what we are seeing today in the world. That is what the COVID pandemic is teaching us. That is what the situation in Afghanistan is teaching all of us. And we're calling on world leaders, we're calling on the United Nations to act now, because the price of every inaction is always more than the price of action. And the people of Afghanistan, civilians, innocent people, women, children, and young people who have nothing to do with the war, who have never decided for the war, who never voted for a war, are paying the price, and they do not deserve this. Millions of Afghans are lost. They are exhausted. They are confused what's going to come next. And I'm deeply disturbed by what's happening. We're disturbed as a network by what's happening in Afghanistan. We're really concerned about the situation of women, girls, and what's going to happen with all their dreams, their education, and all their gains. It's really, really painful to see what's happening, to watch what's happening, and to remember my childhood and all those tough days and all the things that we worked for. I think is back to zero. I'm calling on the United Nations to call for an emergency special session on the situation in Afghanistan under its resolution adopted in 1950. Thank you, and have a great day.